So every sculpture in the series starts off the same way, as a rectangular block of wood put on a lathe. After I introduce the turning, a circular logic gets introduced, and this circular logic starts to interact with the originally rectangular shape of the sculpture. And in that way, a tension starts to form. And this tension is really the theme across the whole series. What doesn't really stay consistent though is the way I color wood. For example, I used to really impose color upon wood. So later on, I started to alter the wood itself in order to get a different appearance. And this working method is something I want to discuss in this video. So this piece is made using birchwood and was made at the stage that I mostly use paint to control the surface. And here as well, I used black paint. The thing about using a solid color on top of wood, most of the grain variation and natural color of the wood disappears. And what you're left with is the geometry that's created by the wood turning. Now, the contrast between the pale birch and the black paint together create a contrast that emphasizes the cut. So since the surface within this sculpture is so simplified, you create this big distance between the wood and the graphic translation of the turning process. And it made me wonder at the time whether I could experiment within the contrast. So this piece is an experiment in the opposite direction, meaning a dark wood color painted white. And as you can see, the white color tends to come to the front a little bit more, whereas the darker wood color recedes a little bit. And the white paint also tends to pronounce the wood grain a little better than the black paint does. So even though the white paint sits on top of the sculpture still, the wood reappears again through the pronounced texture. So with this sculpture, I didn't apply any color at all. Instead, I used the natural properties of the wood. This piece is made of oak wood, and oak wood has tannins in it. Tannins give a chemical reaction when you apply a mixture of steel wool and vinegar. The wood changes color, which is, as you can see, the grain and other properties are still very visible because of this. So the wood surface darkens, yet the wood structure remains the same. In other words, the contrast becomes more visible, yet the wood itself stays unified. The wood becomes a crucial part of the storytelling, because instead of the color being applied on the wood, the color merges from the wood. So normally padouk is bright red, yet when you bleach it, like I did here, you get a green grayish color. So the color change is quite dramatic, and therefore the turning becomes a lot more legible. It also creates an avenue in which I could explore how much of a contrast I can create using natural wood properties. This spine sculpture was finished using shushugiban, a technique consisting of burning the wood in order to prevent it from rotting by rain or protecting it from termites. And it creates this deep dark color and also changes the structure of the wood. So the grain becomes a lot more pronounced, and therefore the contrast doesn't only reside in the color, but it also starts becoming tactile, and the surface becomes a lot more dominant. Starts competing with the turning a little bit maybe, which is an interesting tension that I'd like to explore a little bit more. So there we go, an overview of the material I use and the way I color it. The core principle of putting a wooden block on a lathe and turning it but preserving some of its original shape is the underlying structure for the entire series, and it's something I want to deepen in the upcoming video.